This is part 3 of JavaScript with ASP.NET tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss how to implement Select All checkbox in an ASP.NET GridView control. Here is what we want to achieve. If the checkbox in the header is checked, then all the checkboxes in the grid view should also be checked. If we uncheck the checkbox in the header, then all the checkboxes in the grid view should also be unchecked. And when we click this delete selected link button, then all the rows that have the checkboxes checked should be deleted. So let's see how to implement this. We will be continuing with the example that we worked with in part 2, so please watch part 2 before proceeding. So the first step here is to add this new column which is going to contain our checkbox controls. So we are going to add a template field to the grid view control. So let's flip to Visual Studio. So let's go ahead and add a template field. And to do that, from the Grid View Tasks pane, click on Edit Columns link, and then select Template Field from Available Field section, and then click Add. So this is going to add the template field to the end of the Grid View control, but we want that to be present as the first column within the Grid View control. So select that template field, and then click on this arrow button, which is going to move it to the top. And then click OK. So we have added the template field to the grid view control, but then since we did not specify item template and header template, we don't have anything displayed within the grid view control. Look at that, we have a template field added, but then nothing is displayed because we don't have an item template specified. Now we can specify what we want to have within the item template, either using the source mode or using the designer. Let's use the designer, and then click this link Edit Templates, and we have to specify the item template and header template. So within the item template, let's have a checkbox control. So within the item template we have the checkbox. Now let's go ahead and specify header template, and even within the header template we want a checkbox control, but let's change the ID of the checkbox within the header control to checkbox Select All checkbox, checkbox Select All. And now let's click End Template Editing. So look at that, we have now got our checkboxes both within the header and the data rows as well. So within the source mode, if you look at the template field, we have a header template with a checkbox and an item template with a checkbox. Now the next step is to implement the required JavaScript functions. So basically we want two JavaScript functions. The first JavaScript function is going to check all the child rows when the checkbox in the header is checked. If we uncheck the header checkbox, then all the child rows should also be unchecked. So let's write a function for that first. So let's flip this web form to the source mode, and then let's include a section for our script. Script type equals text/JavaScript, language equals JavaScript, and let's write a function. Let's name this header checkbox clicked, and to this function we are going to pass the header checkbox as a parameter. Now let's create a variable. Let's name this GridView equals document.getElementById, and the ID of the GridView control is GridView1. So let's copy the ID, so we have the GridView control. Now let's loop through each row, each data row within the GridView control. So for var I is equal to 1, I less than gridview.rows.length I plus plus gridview.rows of I. So let's loop through each row within the grid view. So rows of I dot columns of 0. Now where is the checkbox present within the grid view control? The checkbox is actually present within the first cell, right? So it's actually dot cells of 0 dot get elements by tag name. And when we run this page, the checkbox control that we have within the first template field, these checkboxes will be rendered as input controls. So we are going to get a reference of that checkbox control by using this method, get elements by tag name. So in every row, go to the first cell and get the element, the checkbox element by tag name, and the tag name is going to be input. Now this get elements by tag name method, this is actually going to return a collection of all the input elements, but we know that within the first cell we are going to have only one input element, which is our checkbox. So we want to get that one, so I'm going to index that with 0, basically specifying that we want to get the first item, and then dot checked equals, and to this function we are passing the header checkbox as a parameter. So whatever is the status of the header checkbox, apply the same status to all the checkboxes in the child rows of the grid view control. That's what this statement actually means. Okay, so pretty straightforward code here. Now let's go ahead and associate this header checkbox click function with the click event of the checkbox that we have in the header template. So here is the template field. Within the header template we have checkbox select all. So on click equals our function, and to this function we need to pass a reference of the header checkbox, so we're going to use this keyword. Alright, so with this, let's go ahead and run this and see if it's going to work as expected. So when we select this, it should select all the checkboxes. Look at that. And if I unselect that, all the checkboxes are unselected. Okay, so let's check this. But one problem now is, let's say for example, if I uncheck one of the child rows, look at that, the checkbox within the header is not unchecked. We want that to be unchecked because not all the rows are selected. Right, now similarly, if we select one one by one row, then as soon as we select the last unchecked checkbox, the checkbox within the header should be checked. Okay, so let's see how to implement that. So all this is driven by checking or unchecking the child row checkbox. Okay, so we need another JavaScript function for that. So let's go ahead and include that. Actually, let's make a copy of this function and let's name this child checkbox click. We are going to pass a checkbox again. In this case, the checkbox reference is going to be the child checkbox. So we need the grid view control, so let's leave it there. We need another variable here. Let's name this at least one checkbox unchecked, and I'm going to set that to false. We are going to assume all the checkboxes, all the child checkboxes are checked. And then we are again going to loop through each row within the grid view control, only the data rows. That's why we are starting at 1. And then if gridview.rows of I cells of 0 get elements by tag name, this is going to remain as it is. If that is equal to false, that means one of the checkbox is unchecked. If that's the case, then set this variable to true. At least one checkbox unchecked, true, and then we can break out of the loop because we know that at least one checkbox is unchecked. If at least one checkbox is unchecked, then we want to uncheck the header text checkbox. If none of them are checked, then we want to if none of them are unchecked, that means all of them are checked. In that case, we want to check the header checkbox. Okay, so let's copy this. So let's grab the checkbox within the header. So the header checkbox is present in row 0. So rows of 0 cells of 0 get element by tag name. So this is going to return us the header checkbox, and the checked status of that header checkbox is going to be equal to not whatever the value that is present within this variable. So if at least one checkbox is unchecked, then this value will be true. If at least one checkbox is unchecked, then we want to uncheck the header checkbox. So since this variable contains true, true of negation, that's going to be false, checked will be false of the header checkbox. That's why we're using not here. So now the next step is to associate this JavaScript function with the child checkbox. So let's go ahead and associate this with onClick event of the child checkbox control. And again, we need to pass a reference to that. Alright, so let's go ahead and run this now. Look at this, select all checkboxes are selected, uncheck, all of them are unchecked. Now look at this, as soon as I uncheck one of the rows, look at that, the header checkbox is unchecked. Now I keep on checking one by one, and notice that the moment this is the last row that has the checkbox unchecked. So once we check that checkbox, look at that, the header checkbox is automatically checked. Okay, now what else we want to do is we want to have a link button here within the header, and that link button should say delete selected, and when we click that link button we want to delete all the selected rows. So let's see how to implement that now. So the first thing that we need to do is we need delete selected link button within the header. So let's go ahead and add that. So here we associated those JavaScript functions with the onClick events of the respective checkbox controls. Now let's go ahead and include a delete selected link button, and we already have a template field for implementing this delete link button. So if we flipped this to the source mode, the second column within the grid view control, it already has a template field, and the item template is a link button, and notice that the text of the link button says delete, and that's how we got this delete column. And in the header template we want a link button which says delete selected. So all we are going to do is we are going to include a header template here within the second template field, and then I'm going to make a copy of this link button. Okay, now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this command name button, and then I'm going to change the text to delete selected, and let's change the ID to LB delete selected. Okay, and let's associate click event on click. So this is the server side click event. On click equals LB delete selected underscore click. So let's create this server side function, event handler function. So let's flip this to the code behind file. Let's actually make a copy of this page load event, and let's change the name of the event handler method to LB delete selected click. Okay, so this is the server side function which will be called when we click that delete selected link button. Okay, so with this, if we go ahead and run this, we should have delete selected link button. Now at the moment when we click that, nothing is going to happen because we have to write code to delete all the selected rows from the grid view control. Okay, so we need a server side function which can do that. So let's flip to the code behind file. We need some ADO.NET namespaces, so let's go ahead and bring them in. We need system.data, we need system.data.sql client, and we need system.configuration, and we also need system.text. Alright, so first I'm going to implement a private function here, private void, and I'm going to call this delete, and to this function we're going to pass the IDs of the employees that we want to delete, and I'm going to pass that as a comma separated list. of IDs. So I'm going to use string data type and IDs. So the first thing is we need to retrieve the connection string from web.config file. So configuration manager dot connection strings of. So let's retrieve the connection string from web.config file. And if you look at web.config file, the name of the connection string is sampledb connection string. So let's copy that dot connection string. Now let's create SQL connection object con equals new SQL connection. Let's pass the connection string as the parameter. And the next step is to create SQL command cmd equals new SQL command. Now we need a stored procedure which is going to delete the employees by ID. So let's go ahead and create that stored procedure first. So within our SQL Server Management Studio, create procedure sp delete employees. And to this, let's pass IDs of the employees that we want to delete. And let's make the data type to nvarchar of 1000 as begin end. And we are going to make use of dynamic SQL here because the IDs that are coming into the stored procedure is a comma separated list of string. Is a string which contains comma separated list of IDs. So execute delete from employees where ID in. So we need to specify the comma separated list of IDs, and those are present within this parameter, plus close the bracket. Alright, so let's go ahead and execute the stored procedure. So this is the stored procedure that we want to execute. So let's copy the name of it and specify that here. And then we want to use the SQL connection object that we have just created, and this is a stored procedure, so we have to tell that to the command object. So command.command type equals command type.stored procedure, and this stored procedure has got a parameter, so we need to supply a value for that parameter. So let's go ahead and create a SQL parameter object. Let's name that parameter equals new SQL parameter, and the name of the parameter is @IDs. So let's copy that, and the value for that is going to be present in this parameter. And let's associate this parameter object with the command object. So command.parameters.add the parameter object. And let's open the connection, execute the command. Since it's say delete, let's use command.execute non-query and close the connection. Okay, so now when we click the delete button, this is the event handler that that will be called. So this should call this delete method. But before we can call that delete method, we have to capture the selected IDs from the GridView control. So whatever IDs, whatever rows that are selected, we need to retrieve the IDs of those selected rows. So let's loop through each row within the GridView control. So for each GridView row, let's call it grn GridView1. So the ID of the control is GridView. GridView1.rows. Now to retrieve the IDs, okay, we have to convert this ID column to a template field as well. So it will be easier to find the control and then retrieve the value from that control. Okay, so let's go ahead and convert the ID column to a template field. Click Edit Columns and then ID column. At the moment, if you look at this ID column, it's a bound field. Notice that here we have it, and ID column is a bound field. Let's go ahead and convert that to a template field. So select ID column and click on this link, convert this field into a template field. And now if we flip this to the source mode, ID field should now be a template field. And the reason we have converted it to a template field is because if it's a template field, then you can get a reference of this label control by using the ID of that label control. And then it will be easier to retrieve the ID value that is present in that respective label control. Okay? Right, so within the code behind file, gr.find control, and the control that we want to find is this label control, and the ID of the label control within the template field is label1. So let's copy label1, and this find control will return that as a generic control, but we know that it's a label control, so I'm going to typecast that to be of label control. And then the text property should give us the value, the ID value. Okay, now let's go ahead and create a variable here. Actually, let's use a string builder object, string builder, sb equals new string builder, and to that we want to append sb.append the text, and then we want a comma separated list, so let's append a comma as well. Okay, now actually let's pass that here. So along with the text we want a comma. Alright, now we want to do this only for the rows where we have this checkbox checked. So we need to get a reference of that checkbox and see if the checkbox is actually checked. So now here gr.find control, and within the data rows, what is the ID of the checkbox control? The ID of the checkbox control is checkbox1. So let's copy that. So gr.find control checkbox1, that is going to return a reference to the checkbox control. So let's typecast that to be of type checkbox. And let's create a variable here. Let's name this checkbox. Let's call it cb equals whatever checkbox we have found if cb.checked. Okay, only then get the ID. Otherwise we don't want to delete those rows, so we wouldn't bother getting the ID of the rows where the checkbox is not checked. Okay, so once it has gone through all the rows within the grid view control, we are going to get a comma separated list of IDs that are actually checked. But then if you look at this code right here, notice that we'll end up with an extra comma at the end of the last ID, so we need to remove that comma. So sb.remove, what do we want to remove? The last comma. sb dot, how are we going to get the last? And if you look at this remove method, obviously it will need the start index where we want to start removing the characters. And to get the start index, I'm going to use the last index of method. So sb.toString dot last index of comma, and then how many characters we want to remove? We want to remove only one character. Okay, and then let's call the delete method which we have written previously and pass the IDs to it, and that's going to delete the selected rows. So delete method, and the IDs are present within the string builder object, so let's convert that to string. And then once we have deleted, let's call dataBind method on the grid view control. Alright, so let's go ahead and run the page and see if it works the way we expect it to work. Alright, so select all. let's deselect, 2 rows, 1 and 2 we deselected. We have 3 rows selected, so when we click delete selected, it should delete those 3 rows. Look at that, those 3 rows are deleted. Let's quickly check that in the database. Look at that, we only have 2 rows. Now if we go ahead and select all 2 of them and click delete selected, all of them should be deleted. Now let's come back, check, notice that all rows are deleted. So here are the 2 server-side functions we have written just now, and here is the delete store procedure. Thank you for listening and have a great day.